Hey everybody, what's going on and welcome to GNR Central. It's Monday morning, which means it's time to go over this past week's Guns N' Roses news. And we've heard some rumors the last couple of weeks from Alan Niven about how he thinks Izzy might show up at one of the shows that Guns is going to be playing this coming fall at the Louder Than Life Festival. But one thing that kind of got missed and got pointed out to me by one of my subscribers is that if you guys look at the lineup, Guns N' Roses headlines Saturday night, which is September 28th. The following day, Matt Sorum's supergroup Deadland Ritual will be playing the same festival. They're probably playing an afternoon slot, but this is the first time that I can recall on the Not in This Lifetime tour where a former member of Guns N' Roses is on the same festival as the band is. And, people could say Izzy's going to join them, but, if there's ever a good time for Matt Sorum to come join the band, I think this might be it. I think it would be great for him to teach Frank how to play the drums properly, but we'll have to wait and see. Turning now to some Slash news, guys. So Slash recently spoke to Belfast Live, and he talked about how dark his days were following Guns N' Roses when he left the band in 1996. He said, in the 90s, when I left Guns N' Roses, I was just sort of out there. I was drinking myself to death, and I was out there playing all over the place, and I had no real direction of where I was going or any real concrete idea as to what I was going to be doing for any predetermined amount of time, and it was very excessive. He said, I'd left my band, I was getting divorced, I was going through all this stuff. I had the record company issues, and it was really classic rock and roll life, the bad side. So he said Guns got to be the biggest band in the world, and that was all great. When I left I left all that security behind. I went through this crazy stuff, and I drank myself through it. I did drugs through it, and it was just like textbook almost. Slash also revealed he struggled heavily with addiction through the early millennium up until 2005. He said Velvet Revolver started, and just because of the nature of the band, and it's my own fault, but within that context, it was easy to do. He said I got completely strung out again, and at that point, I realized there was nothing about being strung out that reminded me of anything like it had been the first years I started doing drugs. It was pretty miserable. And after that, with alcohol, nothing was doing it for me, and I had to decide to stop. Turning now to some Axl news. So Melissa Reese is once again sick. If you guys have seen the amount of sugar she eats, I'm not surprised. So she posted this on Instagram saying, before and after, thank you to Axl for flammable cereal. You get a present from that woke homie who know, and it makes you feel when you need it the most. What's funny is the worst thing you can eat when you're sick is sugar. But Melissa Reese somehow still eats sugar when she's sick. I find that hilarious. We got some other Melissa Reese news. So with Game of Thrones coming back for its final season, I have to admit, I'm one of the only people who doesn't watch the show. I don't get what the whole fanboy, aura is of this entire show. But she posted, so I guess she's getting into the cosplay for Game of Thrones. So this is something she posted, and fans are basically commenting on her wig that she's wearing. Turning now to some Duff Punk Rock McKagan news. So he's been doing some interviews, and even before he did some of the interviews, he went to that show that Kevin was at the Grammy Museum on April 4th, and he talked about his new solo song, Feeling, and how it was inspired by his late bandmate Scott Weiland, in addition to other singers like Chris Cornell, Chester Bennington, and Prince. And he told a story about how he tried to save Scott Weiland from drugs back in 2003 when Velvet Revolver was starting up. He said, when I met Shooter Jennings, I had these chords and all I had was feel. And when the lights go down, you're basically still there and all you hoped here remains. And it was coming from Scott Weiland, who I worked with and really tried to help out a few times, intensely one time, like going to the Cascade Mountains for a month, intensely, and just saw it take over him. GNR were on the road, and if anybody has their thing, mine is Prince. He's the magical entity to me, and everybody has that record that saved your life. And 1999 gave me the impetus that I basically needed to get out of the heroin-infested Seattle in 1983 and move to LA. I was in Mexico City, we were playing, and Axl texted me saying, I'm really sorry, turn on the news. And because they knew I'm a lifelong Prince fan, and I actually cried from that text. He said then Chris Cornell, Susan Holmes, and Susan Silver were pregnant at the same time, and they had their daughters 2 weeks apart, and we hung out with them, our babies, just real life stuff. And with Chris dying, the weird thing about that was that night, about 8 o'clock at night, Axl came into rehearsal and said, let's do Black Hole Sun, let's try that song. We rehearsed until 12:30 that night. I get home, and GNR guitarist Richard Fortas texted me that Chris Cornell was dead. And then he went on to talk about Chester Bennington, saying, and then Chester was a friend of ours. We're friends with his family, and they're just friends, and I don't really name them in the song. And I gathered up the energy of those four, of the loss, the sense of loss, and it's just a song. There's a little hope, like we're going to remember you, and you're still here, these four in particular, and so many more before that. It's been tragic, but the celebration is I get to work with Shooter now and do something really bad and cool, and I celebrate that every day. I have to say this next story really didn't surprise me at all. This broke, according to Loudwire, earlier in the week, and the real source of this was The Blast. So it reported that Scott Weiland reportedly owed the IRS almost $1 million in back taxes when he died in 2015. So this was reported when a tax lien was brought against the musician's estate at a time when many are busy filing their last-minute returns this month. So Mary Weiland, who was Scott's ex-wife, was listed on the lien as his representative, and according to the documents obtained by the celebrity news outlet, they showed that Scott Weiland owed about $818,569.62 to the IRS. Weiland apparently didn't pay his federal income taxes from 2012 to 2014, and that's on top of the nearly $250,000 in back taxes levied against the singer's estate by the California State Tax Franchise Board last year. So Weiland, as you guys know, was found dead in December of 2015 on his tour bus while playing shows with his band, the Wildabouts. Turning now to some other news, there was some ACDC tour dates that apparently leaked online. Some people thought that this could mean that ACDC is going to be touring with Brian Johnson. This was according to Metal Wani. But what's funny about these tour dates is that some of these dates have already passed. Like April 18th already happened. There was nothing that happened in Europe with ACDC. So I don't know if these tour dates are legit. But the blowhard Eddie Trunk said that he has a good source that claims that ACDC will be touring with Brian Johnson on vocals. So as that story breaks, we'll keep you guys up to date. Turning now to some Slipknot news, or sort of Slipknot news. So Cory Taylor was playing a show called Cory Taylor and Friends in Green Bay, Wisconsin this past last weekend. And he played a Guns N' Roses cover. He was joined by the dance troupe Cherry Bombs featuring his fiancée Alicia Dove, and they played a set which included covers of It's So Easy by Guns N' Roses and Hot for Teacher by Van Halen. So if you guys wanted to see footage of that, I've linked to it down below. I always think it's a shame that he never got the part for Velvet Revolver. I think it would have been cool to hear what those songs sound like. But I think his vocals on It's So Easy are great. He's got the perfect voice for that song, and I'd like to see him play some other Guns N' Roses songs as well. Turning now to a cool documentary that I hadn't seen before. I want to thank one of my subscribers on Twitter for letting me know about this. So Vice actually did a documentary about Guns N' Roses concert in Colombia from 1992. Now it's all in Spanish, but they have English subtitles, and it's about 10 minutes long or so. And they interviewed the promoter, who was the promoter at that time in 92, and he told some stories that I don't think I've ever heard before about what happened at that show. Like, that was, for those of you who don't remember, it was a show where the band was playing November Rain and it started to rain really heavily, and then once the song was done, it stopped raining. Slash said it was probably one of the greatest moments from what he can remember of playing in Guns N' Roses. And there was a lot of stuff going on in Colombia at that time. Pablo Escobar was a wanted man. It was a really dangerous country. They had so much security around the band. And the band at one point apparently tried to leave the show early, and the promoter wasn't having any of it. And it was funny. He got the band to get cavity searched like at the airport on their way out. But there was a lot of cool stuff in that documentary. If you guys want to check it out, the link is down below, and you guys can go check it out. It's definitely cool. And that whole period that Guns N' Roses was in South America is honestly, I think, one of the most fascinating legs of the Use Your Illusion tour, because there was so much instability. Venezuela had their government almost got overthrown, and Guns N' Roses, some of their staff and their plane got confiscated trying to leave the country. And then they were being searched for drugs all the time because there was rumors that they had brought drugs into the country. So it came out this week that Eagles of Death Metal's Jesse Hughes is going to be covering a Guns N' Roses song on his new solo album. So it was reported that he will release a covers album titled Eagles of Death Metal Presents Boots Electric Performing the Best Songs We Never Wrote, which will be released on June 7th. So it's a 13-track LP that includes the following bands, including ACDC song High Voltage, as well as It's a Long Way to the Top. They'll also be covering the Kiss song God of Thunder and the Guns N' Roses song It's So Easy. The album is also going to feature a material originally released by Eagles of Death Metal member Josh Homme, his band Queens of the Stone Age, and you guys can view the full track list below. So last year, a vinyl-only limited edition of the album featuring a different track list and the name The Eagles of Death Metal Presents Pigeons of Shit Metal was released by the band, and the title was inspired by Guns N' Roses frontman Axl Rose before he fired the band from their opening slot in 2006 at the Quicken Loans Arena in Cleveland. So Jesse Hughes, for his part, has tried to patch things up with Axl, saying the following: "Every year I've sent him a very sincere request around Christmas time, inviting him to come into the studio and record 2 Christmas songs and be released as the Pigeons of Shit Metal," he told Brave Words. "And always, I close it with a very judgmental, because I want you to know, Axl, I'm willing to forgive you, and I feel like the rest of the world is too. So I think that's a final statement he probably doesn't appreciate too much, and to be honest, Axl probably has better things to do."